Common situation models. One of the hardest parts about performance tasks for me, and I've heard this from many people, is that in performance tasks, it's very hard to to create that authenticity, to really give students a situation that they will relate to as individuals, as students, um, or students may struggle with uh, where did my words go? Sorry, guys. I don't know where my sentence went. I apologize. So one of the ways I found to make these performance assessments more authentic, students may struggle with understanding the directions. And one of the ways to make our assessments more authentic and more understandable, clearer for students, including why we're doing it, what standards we're meeting, etc., is to use a situation model. It helps us organize our thoughts and students know what the purpose is, and it's great. So today we are going to look at 4 common situation models. And before I continue, I want to give full credit for where credit is due. First off, Leslie Gran has an amazing website called Gran for Languages that is linked below this slide that has lots of information on 3 of these models together, so you can see templates, you can see examples, especially for the scrap model as we get to that one. Michaela Klaus-Nix was the one that introduced me to this. She is a teacher and presenter out of Georgia. And then an English teacher at Atherton did a session a couple years ago at the Deeper Learning Symposium on Raft. And Raft is a strategy that I used as a student. We had Raft activities when I was in middle school and high school, and I have come back around to them and fallen in love with them as a teacher because of the amount of choice they provide. So let's take a second, 20 minutes, and look through these models for ways to create performance tasks for students. So the first one is a Raft. Raft stands for Role, Audience, Format, Topic. And Raft is a great way to provide lots of choice for our students in their assessments. A Raft is ideal when there are multiple choices in every single column. So this particular one was one I used with my students for an assessment in the spring. We were assessing the Help Me unit for level 2, which is on health and wellness. And the student was, I assigned the student role. I did not provide options there because I couldn't come up with any. So you're a student hoping to display positive citizenship in the Kentucky community by providing Spanish language advice about staying #healthy at home. And this is when healthy at home was such a big thing with Andy's 5 o'clock weekly or daily broadcasts. I gave students choices in their audience, choices in their format, so through an infographic, through an original song, through social media, through a narrated slideshow, any kind of thing they wanted to do, and through some other creative idea that I've gotten approved by Miss Sexton. If students can come up with another way to do things, I generally let them, so long as they've talked to me about it. And then I gave multiple topics, so about at-home exercise, about positive mental health, ways to avoid getting sick, hobbies, any other health-related topic that they had approved. This really helps students have more ownership because they've decided what they're doing. I had a student end up specifically choosing Cinco de Mayo. He was like, I want to do a thing to specifically the Mexican population in our area about ways to celebrate Cinco de Mayo in a healthy way, things they should avoid and things they shouldn't. And I was like, wow, that is the first culturally relevant, possibly Cinco de Mayo project from a student I've ever heard of in my life. I was proud of him. He understood it wasn't for everyone, but he wanted to target that specific audience. And I got all kinds of things. Lots of kids made TikTok videos. By the way, you don't have to have an account for them to do TikTok. And I tell them only to do a TikTok if they already have it and their parents have approved them having it. They can download that and give it to you later. And then they get all the features of things that they're used to, and you get a good product in the end. Lots of students made infographics on Canva, narrated slideshows. They use Google Slide. They use just recorded audio on their phone. This allowed for a lot of differentiation of technology. So if a student only had access to a phone, they were still fine. If a student had access to a full design suite, they could use their full design suite to make a fancy infographic or video. It's up to them and what they enjoy using. Another example of a raft that I have used in the past was for the city unit, again in level 2. I think all of these are for level 2, where I had a whole lot of roles that students could take. They had to choose an audience, a format, and a task or their title. So things like living like a Louisvillian, Louisville entertainment, health, safety, and public services. I think I ended up having a student make a Instagram account about the best places to eat and to buy food around Louisville. So it was a lot of getting around, doing lots of helping of other people. And all of these, again, were students from the perspective of where they are right now. Students making a healthy at home video for the Hispanic population in Kentucky right now. Students making information specifically for Cubans, because we had talked about Cuban immigration during this unit, about someone who's recently migrated from Cuba and what information they would want, or from whom. So the next model is a scrap model, which is situation, challenge, role, audience, product. And this model is great if you want to limit choice. If you felt like having all of those options was overwhelming for you as a teacher to keep track of, that's fine. It's okay. With this scrap model, every situation has usually just one option. It's just a clear way to make students, it's a clear way to provide instructions for students and to outline a task so that students know what's going on and you are making sure it aligns with what you're wanting to do. This one is one I have not used yet. It is one I am planning on using as an in-class activity during NTI 2.0. But it is an interpersonal task, so it might be harder. And you can read through that on your own. Here's one, I used the scrap model, but I used it for an IPA, for an integrated performance assessment that has all of the modes. One thing I've learned recently, as I've been looking at ways to assess during online instruction, is that IPAs, while usually they go interpretive, interpersonal, presentational, they can actually go in any order. I hadn't thought about that before. And so in this case, I have my situation. This year, a new student joined your team. The family just moved to Kentucky from Mexico, and you seem to be hitting it off well as friends. Instead of saying soccer team or football team or chess team or whatever, most students are part of some kind of team, leadership team. And so this left it open for students to connect to themselves as they saw fit. The challenge, you've invited your new friend to spend the weekend with you, plan a schedule and experiences both of you will enjoy. Your role and audience, a lot of times I connect those two when I make these kinds of assessments, just because a lot of times they're hard to separate. And then with the product, I had multiple products. I had an interpersonal product. So you interview your friend about their preferences and routines, meal times, etc. Interpretive. I had both a listening option and a reading option. As a teacher, I could choose to have students do both or just one, or choose which one. All of it's fine so long as they all measure similar goals and present analogous outcomes. And finally, presentational. Email your friend a plan for the week. So instead of it just being write a plan, it's email, which is a more professional context. It has to have, not has to, but should have some level of netiquette involved. How do you start an email? How do you sign off on an email? Things like that. So you're teaching students more intercultural communication skills as well. The next performance task setup is GRASPs, which goes goal. Sorry, Celia, yes, the presentation is available at tinyurl, tiny.url, sorry, tinyurl.com/digital assessments. You should be able to access that URL right now and be following along and accessing the links below. So if anyone got kicked out back then, lost the link, there it is in the chat again, tinyurl.com/digital-assessments. All right, GRASPs. GRASPs has goal, role, audience, situation, product, performance, purpose, and standards. This is very similar to the SCRAP model. I prefer the SCRAP model, but I've also used the GRASPs model. It's nice because it includes the standards. So students can see, oh, we did this standard in class and now I'm using it here. And it's great to see how those standards, how those ICANNs connect to each other. In this case, we created a polished album review in Spanish. For those of you who are Spanish teachers, Revista Literal is a great way to add authenticity to your performance assessments because it is a digital magazine written by Spanish language students for Spanish language students. And if anyone knows of similar projects for other languages, you should share them in the chat because it's great. Thank you, Patty, for letting everyone know. Yeah, make a copy in your own Google Drive of the chat so that you have all the links. That way you can access things, and you could take notes in the speaker notes. So it's all saved in one place for yourself. So in this case was for, again, level 2, unit 2, entertainment. And we were talking about music. So the students created a polished album review. We formatted it like it was going onto a website. We included images, all sorts of things. And one way that I use performance assessments in my class is I have the on-demand writing. So students had to do this like off the top of their head in class as an on-demand, and that became the rough draft for the polished product later. So we did revisions afterwards, but the end goal was the same throughout, a professionally formatted album review like we've looked at in class, because that was a lot of our interpretive mode, was looking at album reviews, music reviews from other sources. And then we created the polished album review in Spanish. All right, this last one is very much the most teacher-centered. I would not give this outline to students, but it is great for teacher planning, especially if you are struggling with creating your summative assessment during backwards design. This is a way to go a bit more in depth with it and think through each of the pieces parts. So square is standards, essential question, unwrapped content, application, resources, and evidence. And it needs a lot more detail. So which standards does it target? What's the essential question? Unwrapped content. I think they were stretching just to get the U there. But unwrapped content is like what very specific skills are students going to have to learn? And in order to make this fit, I didn't make that all ICANN skills, but it's me as a teacher, what am I going to have to construct lessons around for my students? What application of learning? So what are they creating? What resources am I going to have to supply? That includes a lot of your interculturality and input. And then what individual evidence is more of how will you score students? How will you evaluate students? So these are, again, the four: raft, scrap, grasps, and square. And what we are going to do is take the next 30 minutes, and each of you is going to create your own performance task using one of those acronyms. Hi, Future Madeline here. Before I get you started on creating your own raft, scrap, grasps, or square model, I wanted to go in and give some feedback and commentary based on the work that I've seen from other teachers over the past couple sessions of giving this live. Specifically, I wanted to talk a little more about the categories of role and audience. First off, role. When we think about role for students, we want it to be something achievable and authentic. So if our students are white, we don't want to ask them to be Hispanic students, because they can't. That's nothing that they will ever achieve or change about themselves. We want the role always to be something that the students can achieve. Similar with the audience, we want this to be realistic for students. A lot of teachers then take that as role and audiences. Well, the student is themselves and the audience is their classmates and their teacher, and they're doing this for school. And if that's the situation that we can come up with in the moment, we roll with it. However, it's always a little better to say, how are you going to use this content outside of the classroom? Why are we learning this in the classroom to take outside? So Leslie Graham, who I've mentioned before, has a great list of roles and audience in her setup for Scrap that I'm going to show you. So this is on the page Designing Performance Tasks, and if you scroll down, there's a pre-made list of roles and audiences. So at the top we do see student, classmate, and teacher, but then there are also things like guide or docent, tutor, employee, camp counselor, teammate, guests, visitor, blogger, tourist, etc. And these are all things that every student can choose to be at some point. Another way that we could expand this within our own school context and community context here in JCPS would be saying exactly where the student is volunteering or where the student is coming in contact with someone. We have lots of great international organizations. So Kentucky Refugee Ministries, especially for French teachers, that would make a lot of sense. The Americana community, you're not just being a tutor, you are specifically tutoring with Americana, and that gives range for lots and lots of modern languages. Catholic Charities is another strong one. Sister Cities, which I think has all of our modern languages that are taught in JCPS as sister cities. So a visitor to your sister city or hosting people from the sister cities, and the World Affairs Council. So students somehow working with those organizations are things they could be doing this instant as students and would be a great use of their language skills. Another perspective on role versus audience could be using the pathways or academies that your students are in at your school. So in my school, we have a graphic design, computer science pathway, we have a business pathway, and we have a FCCLA pathway, future, darn, I don't remember the acronym, but it's where a lot of the cooking, money skills, elementary and earlier education stuff goes. So you could capitalize on that. If my students are in computer science pathway, maybe they're designing an app for a business outside of the United States. If we are working with the FCCLA pathway, maybe they're working to be a caterer. If your school has a health science pathway, the health sciences absolutely need speakers of the target languages. So you are working as a nurse, you are working as a doctor, etc. All of that is relevant to students, possible for students given context, and takes the language to a level of reality beyond just, you are a student, you are in my class, and you have to do this because you are in my class. Thank you.